Hey, welcome back, Broken for Better. Kurt Schaer, and we are looking forward to spending time with you today. Hey, today's going to be a little bit different. A couple weeks back, I had the amazing opportunity to be on the Truth Doesn't Hurt podcast with Tyler. It got so deep, so real, so raw, and so authentic so fast that I asked him if I could share that content on our platform. I truly hope and pray that this podcast today does an amazing thing for your own heart, that you see things differently, that you pray different, that you talk to God differently from the time spent today. Hey, I also want to invite you this Saturday, May 6th, is our marriage intensive. Registrations are still coming in. It's going to be an amazing, amazing day. Love for you and your partner to be a part of that if you're in the Tampa Bay area. Also, please prayerfully consider being a monthly supporter of Broken for Better. It's your gifts that allow us to continue to do what we do. So like and subscribe, be a monthly supporter, and once again, enjoy the broadcast.
Hey everybody, it's Tyler, and this is The Truth Doesn't Hurt. And we're coming to you with something a little different today, man. First video podcast of 2023 and beyond. I'm very new to this. There's a lot of technology in front of me that I've never seen. But, we're going to make something happen. Before we continue and I introduce our very special guest, I'm super excited for y'all to meet him. Just to it's been a while since we last had an episode, but truth doesn't hurt. We just want to create a space where we can have those hard conversations and just be honest about how God's working in our life. Or if you feel like he's not working in your life, we can be honest about that as well. So I just hope whoever's listening to this can just really get something out of it, and just don't be afraid to be honest with yourself and honest with God and those around you, and just keep moving forward. But today's topic is, and this one's going to cut deep and I'm super excited. We're talking about how God may fall short in our lives and how to deal with that. And using that as a segue, people can see my hand movements now. That's crazy. Yeah. Using that as a segue, I'm introducing our guest, Kurt, well known as PK, my guy. How you doing today?
Man, I am doing really well. Honored to be here, man. The Truth Doesn't Hurt podcast. I've listened to it, and you even said for those that are listening, and I'm thinking, man, they're watching it. This time they're actually watching. I gotta listen. They're watching, dog. And it's truly an honor to be here, especially for this topic. I don't take it lightly, and truly humbled that you would have asked.
No, I appreciate you taking the time to come and have this conversation with me, especially with it being such short notice. I literally texted him today. I texted you today, and I was like, "Hey, what you doing? When are you free? So we can talk about doing the video podcast." And you're like, "Yeah, man. This might be perfect timing, but we're actually recording today." And here I am. But I'm super excited. People can see my teeth now. It's crazy. But what inspired this topic was I've recently just been in a space where I feel like God has fallen short, and I've been praying about it. I've been told to approach it in different ways, and it just dawned on me. It's just I'm not the only person that's feeling this way. And I personally feel like this is a topic that can be avoided, because when you think of God, nobody wants to think of, oh, God didn't come through for me or anything like that. God's always good, which is true. But at the same time, God is always going to be good, but it may not be approached in a way of which fits our timeline or the way that we expect it to be. So here we are. And now I can actually check notes now because it's not on my phone.
Yeah, let me, while you do that, man, I want to thank you for being willing to broach the subject.
Yeah.
Having done ministry now for as long as I have and stood on a lot of platforms and talk about the goodness of God. I believe it and I lived it, but obviously our story, some things have happened where that's a very real question.
Yeah.
And so I thank you that you're willing to be big enough and bold enough to broach the subject. I'll share some things that I've learned in the last 10 months about it. That's why I love this topic. And why I was like, man, I'm about it and I'm in, because a lot of people want to dodge this, because I think they equate to question God and to question why is God not good and why did he fall short somehow is attacking a relationship and a faith in God just by asking a question.
Yeah.
And so we better not ask the question. We better not touch the subject, because in some way I'm saying that God's less than who he is. And I don't believe that, and I won't believe that, and I don't think God's petty enough to deal with us like that.
Yeah.
He's big and he cares and he knows our hurts and our sorrowful moments too. And so I would just, man, I second it you and just go, man, listen, no matter what season you're in, be authentic and vulnerable with God.
It's the only way.
I mean, it's just, if you're on the mountaintop, man, rejoice. And if you're in the valley, be authentic to being in the valley and be okay being in the valley, because he's the same God on the mountaintop that he is in the valley.
Yeah. And I think, like how you said, Reese, you mentioned that God cares, right? And I feel like when people hear that sentence, that phrase, it's like, oh, God only cares about the really big stuff. But then all those little small details of which we deal with in our life, like, we don't want to bring that up to God, because it's almost like, yeah, he cares, but this is beneath him, sort of thing. And I had to get myself in the mindset of, that's not true. Like, God cares about every single thing. And I know in my life, like, a lot of people know my testimony here and there about dealing with cerebral palsy, or like dealing with what it feels like to have cancer. And, that's a big thing. And that's like, oh, that's something you should talk about. But there are so many small stuff in my life that stem from those things, to where I can honestly sit back and be like, man, God, this sucks. Yeah. Like, this isn't fun at all. Like, you have me telling people this testimony, and people are like, wow, Tyler, you have a great testimony. It's so inspiring, and it makes me feel this way, and it makes me feel that way. But then the person who's presenting that testimony to you, I don't even feel that way. Sometimes I could tell my testimony, and the reaction of which people get from it and how they feel from that testimony, I personally sometimes don't even feel that same way.
Yeah, bro, I'll tell you. And you even, I think saying those statements is huge, because I think those are the things that many people will think and many people will feel, but they won't voice.
Yeah.
I think in the last 10 months, one of the things that's been most eye-opening to me is my wife did a study on tears. And, the Bible is very clear that God collects all of our tears in a jar. And one of the most enlightening things to me was when you look under a microscope at a tear that comes out of happiness, if you look at the particles, they almost look like snowflakes.
Really?
But if you look at tears that come from pain and sorrow, they almost look like swords. It's a bunch of jagged edges. So the tear's completely different. And when I got a hold of this, I thought to myself, when the word says God collects all of our tears in a jar, he's collecting those tears that are jagged and charred and look like swords. He's collecting all of those. Wow. And he's holding them. And those are our most painful, sorrowful moments. And the fact that God would go, man, look at this tear. I created a happy tear and I created a painful tear, but I want to collect those painful tears and I just want to hold them for you. And I was like, man, it was mind blowing to me and really truth to go, that's the God that we serve.
Yeah.
He cares enough that our broken tears, he collects them and stores them.
It really puts emphasis on the small details, because who thinks about that? Like, in my mind, it's just like, oh, tears are tears.
Like, suck it up, move on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, those are the ones where God's going, no, don't suck it up. I'm right here. I'm collecting all of this pain that you're walking through.
Yeah.
I feel that. And I'm with that and I hold that. And yet I suffered too. Like, I watched my son go through what he went. And it has been so revolutionary to me to go, man, if he collects those and he was in the details enough to make those tears look different, then I think I'm okay to bring my sorrow to him.
Yeah.
Like, I'm okay to be honest and truthful. And when you go, man, I think to myself, this sucks. Like, yeah, I can tell you, in those moments, it does suck.
Yeah.
And I think being willing to go, God, this sucks, that's the first step.
Now, I used to have this thought process, and I've always meant to keep it to myself, but then I'm at a point to where it's just kind of like, why would I hold that in? And a lot of people, if I tell them oh yeah, I had cancer when I was younger, and they're like, oh yeah, you're here now, what a wonderful story. And yeah, that's great to hear, and I'm thankful for God for my health and everything. But there was a point to where I remember my mom sent me to just a segue into the first question, but I remember my mom sent me to this camp. It's called Camp Boggy Creek, and it was a camp for kids with cancer. And I remember I met this young lady. Her name was Gabby, She was really cool. She was really into photography. You can tell by the way she talked, like the stuff that she wanted to do with her life. Like there was not a doubt in her mind that that was going to come into fruition. Like she wanted to do this in school. She wanted to do photography and all that stuff. And then after camp, a few months later, this was my first year going there. So I didn't realize what it was like being around other people with cancer. And we had this one big group chat. And then I checked the group chat randomly one day. It was on Facebook. And then they told us like, oh, like Gabby had passed away. So now I'm sitting here like, what?
Dang.
And at the time, like, I wasn't this big scholar in school or had all this stuff going on. I love basketball, but it wasn't like I was this 5-star recruit. And then I started to sit there with the idea of just like, God, like, I know it's one thing to give us cancer, but I had the mindset of like, well, if I get cancer now, then I can assume that the rest of my life is going to be this great storybook ending because that's just what we're so used to hearing, or that's what we would assume. And I remember sitting there and looking in the mirror, it's just like, God, why did it have to be her? If anything, why not me? And that was it's a tough thing to say even now, because then I don't want it to make it sound like I'm not thankful of what he's done in my life, especially with my health. But it was something that I couldn't help but to think about. Like, I'm sitting here like at home, I'm not doing all this great stuff, at least in my own opinion. And this girl had all this stuff planned out and all these people behind her like that. You knew she was gonna get done. And I'm sitting here so unsure of what my life was going to be or what I wanted it to be, but yet I'm still here and she's not. And then a friend of mine was like, oh, it's called survivor's remorse and whatnot. But at the same time, like when you deal with something like that, you can't help but to wonder why you're still in the current position of which you're in.
Yeah, and like, bro, I only know to be one way, and that's as authentic and vulnerable as I can possibly be. And so I'm gonna try to do this. I'm gonna fight back emotions that I have, but they may come. So, 10 months ago, my wife and I walked through, for all that don't know me, 10 months ago, my 17-year-old and his girlfriend were in a single car accident and end up in the bottom of a pond and drowned and we're gone. In 15 minutes, our whole life changed. And Tyler, when you talk about like, having the world in front of him, that was these two. Like, literally, the world was at their fingertips. And for me, I'm looking at my past and my history and where I came from and all that God's rescued me from and this beautiful family that I had. And I'm telling you, bro, like the thoughts of like my life ran its course. Like, man, I got to know you. I got to raise a family. I got to do ministry. Oh, that's wonderful. But why in the world with two people that had the world in front of them? It makes zero sense to me.
Yeah.
And bro, when I talk about like anger, man, I probably experienced depths of anger that I had never experienced before. All the questions, and I think people like they try to love you right and they try to say the right things.
Yeah.
But when you're in moments like that where you're literally questioning the existence of why you're here, all of that stuff is like clanging cymbals in your ears. Like it doesn't compute. Like they're saying all the right things that they should say, but when it's up in here and you're like really in the mix of a mess, that stuff doesn't make sense. And the anger and the bitterness and the why, like those were so real. And one of the things that, again, my wife is genius. And, one of the things that she told me in one of the books that she read was showing anger in a situation shows faith. And I remember asking, like, what? Okay, like, slow that down. How does showing anger show faith? And she goes, Kurt, look, think about this. You're never angry at someone you don't believe in. If you don't have belief that someone's going to come through for you, well, then you don't get mad at them.
Yeah.
Because you expected it to fail. Like I had no expectation that you would or you would not. And so, yeah, I'm not mad at you. Like I didn't think anything less. But who do you get most mad at? It's those people that you had a belief and a thought and an expectation that they would do something that they didn't.
That's good.
And so anger then wells up. And so for me, I really use that, Tyler, as this moment to go, you know what? You're right. I have such a knowledge, such a foundation in faith, such a belief in who God is as a good father that, yeah, I am angry.
Yeah.
My situation is not the way that I would draw it up. Your word says that you're better than any earthly father. And if I wouldn't do that, well, how in the heck do you? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't compute in my brain. And so there was these moments of anger. And bro, what I'm learning in this is like, every time that I get the opportunity to minister now, we see altars flooded of people that have been harboring anger and resentment and bitterness for years and years because they had moments like you,
Yeah.
or they had moments like me, and someone told them, well, you better bottle that up. That's just this thing. You got to get past that. God is good. You got to forget those feelings. And so what they then do is they leave this moment of hurt and they carry anger and bitterness and resentment for the rest of their life.
Yeah. And I think I can say recently I came to terms to where it's like I dealt with having cancer when I was 13, you know? And I'm like during that time, like when I really think of it now as an adult to where I'm able to properly process my feelings, I never really had a moment where I could be upset about like what I was going through. Because right before when I got diagnosed, I was getting ready to go over to my friend's house. And of course, when we got the news from the doctor, like my mom's worried and all that stuff. And I remember like I started to tear up a little bit. And then I remember seeing my mom, like she's just devastated. Like her son's going to go through this. Like she doesn't know like what it's going to be moving forward. And then in my mind, I'm just kind of like, okay, like everyone's so used to seeing me being this happy kid. So I need to keep this up for her sake. And it wasn't until recently, because then, what was it, 2 weeks ago, I actually got a call back from the doctor. And I think the only people that know this is like some people from my life group and then like my mom and my dad. But the doctor had told us that like, oh, your numbers from your cancer and all that stuff has gotten a lot higher. So now they called me at like 3 a.m. And I don't think no one's calling you at 3 a.m. 3 a.m. for good news. Like, yeah.
No,
so
never.
I woke up, I see the phone ringing, and I'm staring at it, and I'm just like, all right, I need to answer this. Like, something tells me to answer this. So, like, I tried to sound as awake as possible. It's one of the nurse practitioners. She's like, oh, is this Tyler? I'm like, yeah. She said, hey, do you know what your accounts were before you came to see us? Now, at that point, the moment she said that, it's like, I'm not a doctor. I can't just draw blood for myself. I can't tell you. And then she just starts to go into like all these different numbers are high and all this other stuff. I go to work the next day. I can't, like, it's almost like I forgot how to do my job. I couldn't get myself in the right frame of mind. And it's just kind of like I was fighting with myself because it's just like, all right, Tyler, you heard this news, but God is good. Be happy. So I'm on the phone talking to all these patients and all this stuff, talking to my coworkers. And then the doctor calls me again. She's like, hey, we need you to take like this specialty medication and all this other stuff. And like, as soon as you can. So at this point, I pull my manager aside. We go into one of the rooms and I'm trying to tell him what's going on. And I'm thinking I'm all good. And in the moment I'm like off the phone and allowing stuff to process, like I feel myself like getting upset to like we're the point you're going to cry. So he's like, do you want to like take a walk or something? I'm like, yeah. But then as I'm thinking about it, and like even sitting here now, before we came to have this conversation, it's just kind of like I've never really allowed myself to have a moment to be angry, to curse, to kick, to scream, whatever, sit in my room by myself, whatever, because it's like I can't be this upset because, oh, God is good. And, you know, Tyler, you have the gift of joy. Thank you for everybody who tells me that. But then at the same time, like how you said when it sounds like clinging symbols, like you're telling me like, oh, Tyler, you have this gift of joy and all this stuff. But I feel like I left that at home. Like in this moment, like I'm upset. Like, I can't properly receive what you're trying to tell me because I'm still trying to process what's going on in my life that a lot of people don't know about, because I've become really good at hiding it with a smile.
Bro, like you could take hiding it with a smile, and that may be the realest thing that people hear this entire day that they hear and see this. Because as sad as it is, that's not just Tyler doing that. That's believers, non-believers, normal people. That's what we learn is the right behavior.
Mm.
We live in a broken world. Nobody wants brokenness around them.
Yeah.
When we went through our darkest thing, our world went from being a whole lot of people with a lot going on to a lot of people falling off the map that we never heard from again.
Yeah.
That's because the life's moving too fast. I got to go. I can't get caught up in your mess. I got my own mess.
Yeah.
And hiding it with a smile is something that I think for me, you know, where you said, and I think at an early age, what's meant to be commendable, like some would look at and go, the fact that you are young, getting dealt this news, and you chose that I'm going to keep being the same guy. A lot. That's like, right. I would say, wow, that's really commendable that you chose to do that. But I think the even more commendable part is to go, I was choosing to make a decision, but inside I was hurting.
Yeah.
That to me, I think, is a bigger statement than even choosing joy, because it's the honesty and vulnerability to go, yeah, I put on a smile, but inside I was broken. And I think, Tyler, what I've learned in these last 10 months is I no longer want to be that guy. And for some people, that'll be the end of relationship with them. Well, I don't like this new Kurt.
Yeah.
I like the Kurt that was the life of the party, that always ran around hugging and smiling and high-fiving everybody. And that's the PK I like. And so that's the guy I want.
Yeah.
That's not the guy you have anymore. Like, something has happened to me that has changed who I am. Now, here's the thing. And I love that you said this. And because you said it, now I can say it, and it has to be okay.
Yeah.
Like, when I went through my dark moments, I like, my conversations with God, like I wouldn't even tell you on this podcast what I said, but when I tell you probably the most vile things to the Lord, I did, because I felt like if it was inside of me, he was going to hear it come out of me.
Yeah.
Now those are very intimate, quiet times that even my wife doesn't know that I had it with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she knows I had them, but those were me and the Lord behind a shut door, audibly and verbally, me saying things and throwing things and breaking things in my hurt. One of the things that I learned very early on going through my grief was I was going to allow myself to have those moments, but you better believe that when I walked out of that time with God, I could stand confident who I was in God. And so having these moments of vulnerability and transparency and honesty with God allowed me to leave those moments going, no, but I know the character of God. And because I know that, I can stand up and talk about the goodness of God. But I need to talk about the goodness of God even when I'm being petty. Even in my most broken moment, I want to talk about the goodness of a Father who sat down there with me.
Yeah.
Who allowed me to vocalize and hurt and scream and cuss and verbalize everything, because I think we've grown up with this nature of, because you don't say it, it must be okay. But the word's very clear that God knows your heart. And so it's like this thought of, well, because I didn't say it, I'm good with God. Well, if you thought it, are you still not? You might as well go ahead and vocalize that, because I feel like if I vocalize it, God can speak to it. And so, man, please, if whoever hears this, know that if you're not having those moments of complete open, and you're saying you just now, like you just here recently realized
this was like 2 weeks ago.
And you first found this information when you were 13.
And I think the one thing that got me upset was just, it was like, all right, God, I dealt with this when I was 13. June will make it 13 years. I'm 26 now. June will make it 13 years since that happened. And then in that moment, it was almost like man, I'm back to being 13 again, receiving that news. Because it's just like, you don't know if you're going to end up in the hospital. And it's one thing when you're 13 in the hospital because, like, you don't know what bills are, responsibility is. Like, okay, like, if I'm in the hospital, I'm just in the hospital. Like, nobody's counting on me to take care of anything. Now I'm a grown man and I got things that I need to take care of. And it's just like, I hate to say it, but I'm telling myself, like, man, God, I don't have time to be in the hospital. Like, nobody that there's no bill place, collector place, whatever is gonna be like, oh man, Tyler might be in the hospital for an indefinite amount of time. Like, let's just give him a break. Let's just give him grace. That's just not the world that we live in. So I'm like upset about a million different things because you're like, at that time your mind's racing. And I don't get me wrong, I love when people come up to me and say like your spirit is like so encouraging and all this other stuff, but I come to the realization because I hear that so much, like I never really get to properly deal with how I'm feeling. Like I've heard my mom tell me how she felt about when I got diagnosed with cancer. I heard my dad tell me how he felt about it. But then there was never really a moment to where it's just like, man, Tyler, like, how you feeling like, dealing with that? Because then it's just like, oh, that was about a decade ago. You're fine now. But then I don't think people understand how it feels like to go to another 15-year-old's funeral, the same age as you, who passed away from the exact same thing that you had, but yet you're the one outside of the casket. How do you like be okay with that? And thank God for life, but it's just kind of like there are just questions that you just cannot help but to ask yourself. Because then now, fast forward 10 years later, it's not like, at least how I would think of it, all right, Tyler, you got cancer 10 years ago, so like, Tyler, you went through all this stuff, so you're going to have a really bright future. That's what I was told. So now, like, you keep hearing that from all your peers and people older than you, and now you're in that future, and you're not seeing all these great stuff, and you're just kind of sitting there like, all right, God, what was the point of all that stuff?
Bro, I'm gonna tell you this, man. Like you were tapping in and you're seeing some things that and realizing some things now that are so honest and real and prevalent in today's society. Because I've often said, like, we're walking through this, you're walking through your thing, and that's a whole nother thing. Like, don't anyone get confused. Like, I can't try to put my situation on you. I can't understand your situation. I've never walked it.
Yeah.
You can't understand my situation. You never walked it. Whoever's listening to this, their dark moment, that's their dark moment.
Yeah.
We may not have walked that, but to them, the same feelings of hurt and God didn't come through and God failed and now I'm angry, that's real. Like, no matter what your darkness is. So, don't take Tyler's situation or don't take my situation. And, man, look at your own life and go, okay, hold on a second. Is this real? Is there a moment in my journey that I can look at and go, man, I've been told my whole life it was going to be good, and now it's not.
Yeah.
That's the truth to go, okay, it's that seed right there. We got to look at that, and we got to analyze that because, you look at many people that are atheists or have lost this love of the Lord. It's innately in every man to have a desire for the Lord. Like that hole is in every man to have a relationship with the Creator. Well, you talk to atheists and agnostics and people who don't believe in God. When you ask them, hey, listen, when did that happen? Many of them, bro, they'll take you back to a time in their life that they can pinpoint when they stopped believing in God. And you know what it's built around? Something went wrong and God didn't come through. And because he didn't, it can't be. And now they live their whole life. Bitterness, rejection, anger, hurt, fear of the unknown, lies of people have spoken to them, and now none of it's true because of this one thing. And I just want to live the rest of my life going, no, listen. Bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
Does not change the character of who God is.
And I was hanging out with a coworker, and it's interesting you brought that up. I was hanging out with a coworker. This was after the day I came back to work after receiving that news, and she's like, she's talking to me, and she's like, Tyler, like, you're such a really good person, and like all this stuff has happened to you, and I can honestly say, because I've talked about my faith openly at work, and she told me, she was like, when I hear stuff about this happening to good people, I'm putting in quotation marks as who's truly good, but she's like, it really makes me question where is God in all of it. So I'm sitting there looking at her because I was, in a way, I wanted to tell her like the right words, because it's different talking about God to people who you know that aren't in it, as opposed to if I'm sitting here talking with you. And I remember looking at her, and I thought about what Ross told me. Like, he called me after I got the news. And sometimes the biggest thing that may happen in your life, or like your darkest moment per se, it may not even be about you. And as human beings, how selfish we can be sometimes, or want all this stuff to work out for our own good. Like, that's a hard concept to grasp. Like, thinking about like where you guys do were broken for better, and then think about what you guys went through to start building that up. Like, I don't think a lot of people would be able to look in the mirror without knowing who God is, just to say, well, like, this happened to me, so I'm gonna find a way to encourage other people. And I told her, I'm just like, hey, like, don't get me wrong, like, what you're asking is a completely normal question, and I feel like Christians themselves ask the same question. But I was telling her, like, I have to find a way to come to peace, or like with the idea that, all right, God, whatever I'm going through right now, it's going to be really tough. And I have my low moments every now and then, believe me. But knowing who he is, and like you said, he's faithful, like, let this encourage the next person who may encounter the same thing, or probably something worse. So where that way they'll be able to start building that proper foundation now, whether the problem is big or small, to lean on him and use that situation to encourage the next person. Because then at the end of the day, like, whenever someone is giving you any sort of encouragement, like, you naturally you want to tell somebody like your own experience closest to what that person went through, because now you have something to relate it to.
Yeah.
So if me, and as much as it can hate, it's tough for me to say out loud, but in me nearly having to die, being a premature baby, walking with cerebral palsy, and having cancer is able to help change somebody's perspective in the slightest bit, not just for Christians, but especially someone who doesn't believe in God, just to see an ounce of his character and how faithful he can be, even in those moments where you just want to toss everything up, so be it.
Yeah, bro. Those are, and I'm thankful that you said, like, even though I want to toss in the towel, because I think those are really eloquent words for a lot of Christians.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what we want to do. But man, that's a foundation that you've got to know. You got to know that you're standing on. I think for all of us, we love those cardboard testimonies, right? Where you see all the flipping videos of God saved me from heroin, and God saved me from sex trafficking, and God saved me, and we love these moments. But you got to think about, there's a lot of people that watch those videos that didn't get saved from those. That they're still walking through their pain and their loss and their darkest moment. And all I can, my wife and I have said this multiple times, like, that thought of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where they look at a ruler and go, our God will save us. Our God can deliver us. But if not, and to think that these young men said, we're going to go through this fiery furnace, and we know God's big enough. But if not, we'll still declare. And it's like, you're walking through what you're walking through, wondering why, like, God, why, like, man, can God heal you of cerebral palsy and cancer right now? We can. You and I both would shout from the mountaintop that God can.
Yeah.
So then, why isn't he? He's good. So what's the problem? Is your faith not big enough? Do you not read enough scripture? Did you not worship enough? Have you had hands laid on you? If people prayed over you, then what's the problem?
Yeah.
It's the you're walking out your, but if not. Can God? Yeah, I know he can. I know he could. But he's not. Bro, I'm on the side of a pond 2.5 hours after my kid's been in the water.
Yeah.
Saying, God, I know that you could pull my kid and his girlfriend up out of that water and they could breathe and walk normal. I know you can. Why not? Do it. Heal him. Like, that story would be better than what you're giving me right now.
Yeah.
That's the story I want. But I've got to choose. But if not. Now, what do I do with that? And that's the, bro, for me, it's that foundational belief of the but if not. God, I am going to declare and shout your goodness, and I'm going to speak truth, and I'm going to be honest of who you are and what your character is and what I know you can do. But if you don't, I'm still going to shout the goodness and the character of God.
No, it's crazy that you brought that up about, like, what if God was just, to heal you from your cancer and your cerebral palsy right now? The amount of times I've hung out with my friends, especially since moving here, being with people that have been at church, and we have the conversation of healing. And then I always get a little awkward in those conversations because I know I'm going to end up being a topic. And they're like, yeah, Tyler, like God could fix that if you just, God can fix this if you just, you just got to pray and believe that God can fix it if you just, whatever comes after that just. That's what was presented to me. And I remember telling somebody that I always get so angry in those conversations because then now, like, first, it makes me feel like there's something wrong with me.
100%.
Second, it makes me feel like there's something wrong with me because of something that I am not doing. So now here I am limping around, and it's just like, well, maybe all my problems could have been solved if I just prayed harder, or maybe I should have been that person on my knees during worship. But then the truth is, like you said, like, if not, you still have to declare God for who he is. Like, his character is not going to change. And I try to tell people, like, whether we like it or not, and we want this storybook ending with every bad situation that we go through, I'll be the first one to say it's not going to be like that. And I'm never going to tell someone, like, oh, like, just deal with it, like, handle your emotions later. But, like, eventually it comes to a point to where, like, I can sit here and sulk, or am I just going to pick up whatever I got and step in faith and move on? And I always explain it this way, like, when people would ask me about how I walk, because of course it's something no one can look at me and be like, oh, he has cancer, but, like, the leg's one of the first thing they see. And I tell people, like, you looking at me and saying, like, oh, how does it feel like to walk like that? I would look back at you dumbfounded and probably just to ask you the same question. How does it feel like to walk like that? Then you're looking like, well, I walk fine. Like, now we're comparing each other's things to each other, but it's just kind of like, this is just who I am. This is just who God made me to be. Like, this is all I know. And I don't know how many times I can explain that to people because it's just so frustrating to hear that, and honestly offensive to hear. Like, if you just do this, God will hear you. Like, it's not that simple. It's true, but, like, sometimes healing doesn't just look like what we can see, like, with our physical eyes. And I tell people, like, I can go play basketball with the rest of them. I could walk myself to the fridge. Like, I've met kids with cerebral palsy who cannot do a single thing. Yet I'm here able to wake up and do everything by my own will, not having anybody to assist me or anything like that. I could go play basketball. I may not be the best at it or the fastest out there, but I can go do it. I feel like I can hang with anybody out there. But yet you want to come to me after seeing me do all that stuff and be like, oh, but God could fix this if you just, you're missing the whole point of what God's already doing. Like, he's not looking at me as something that needs to be fixed, because then I feel like if you're coming up to me and saying that, like, oh, God could fix you if you just do that, you're pretty much saying that, oh, God made a mistake in my creation, but I'm fearfully and wonderfully made.
Amen.
Like, when I came out here, God wasn't like, oh, he has a limp, but I'll let him deal with that later. If he does this, then I'll fix it. Ooh. I'm already here.
Bro, you're straight preaching.
I'm already I'm already here. And like, it just doesn't, like, you don't have to have a physical disability to come to that realization. Like, I fought tears growing up on the basketball court because kids wouldn't let me play. And I wouldn't sit there, go play with myself. I'm like, I'm going to sit here and wait till it's my turn to play because I know God made me this way. And I'm going to make something happen because this is who I am. But I'm sorry. But it's just that, like, I think we look at all this stuff and think about, oh, this is the hand God dealt me. And it's almost like we're trying to play Uno and get rid of the cards, as opposed to, like, when you play poker, like, you got to make what's best with the cards that are in your hands. So you rather have, like, you are the only person that can make it. Am I going to make this a bad hand because I just don't know how to play the game? Or it's like, I'm going to make this a good hand because I know how to use all the tools of which is in front of me.
Listen, I appreciate you using a poker analogy. That speaks to the depths of my soul.
Funny thing is, I've never played.
Well, you used the perfect context of it. I'll just tell you that. And to be honest with you, man, like I'm ripping that analogy. Like, that was so eloquently said, because you couldn't have compared two better card games with two more phenomenal applications. And I want to commend you. Like, truly, it's even more honoring and humbling to be here doing this right now than even I could have imagined. But the realness to go, my non-healing is due to something that I'm not doing. Bro, that's the life. I mean, that's the thought of many. And God forgive us as believers in the church for anyone that we've fostered that mindset or fueled that mindset, because that's truly not the character of who God is. And, I think what God's revealing and showing to you, and what now I'm having to learn and walk that out, is my faith and my story and in the but if not. And if we've got stories and journeys that we live in the but if not, I believe we serve a heavenly Father that's willing, able, and desires to walk that out with us.
Yeah.
I just wonder, what would the story have looked like if they didn't? Would we have ever heard about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? What if they burned up? Is that a story? But in the if not, Jesus goes and heals a man. He's been dead for 3 days. He goes and heals him. But guess what? That man had to die again. Like, he wasn't healed for all eternity.
Yeah.
Jesus healed him in that moment, and now it becomes this miraculous thing that we talk about, but he had to experience pain and death still. And I just don't want anyone to not walk with the Lord because they were experiencing pain and death, or they're experiencing what seems to be lack of in their life. No, you serve a good Father, man. Like, you serve a God that loves you. And I love it. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. Even if you look at the Joneses and you don't look, walk, sound like, or act like the Joneses, that's God fearfully and wonderfully made you. My story is my story. And if I could have written my story, you better believe it would have a different freaking ending than it has right now.
Yeah.
But it's the story I have. And so, you know what I'll do now? I'll stand up and shout from the mountaintops the legacy of my son, and who he was, and who he wanted to be and desired to be, and what he did for the kingdom. And what I'm finding now in standing up and shouting, hey, this is my brokenness, and this is how God's loving me and walking me through my brokenness. All of a sudden now, bodies in the room are all standing up going, wait, time out. I've got that same brokenness.
Yeah.
How are you doing what you're doing? Because I have that, and I'm not doing that. And I'm seeing my but if not, God is using its massive weapons in what he's doing in the lives of others. And if he had saved me from that, yes, I would have a great story to tell. But 6 months after that story, would I be able to look a broken, hurting parent in the eye who has lost their child and go, no, 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 God's still good? Because my testimony would be, no, God healed my son. Like, I don't know your pain. Man, I'm sorry. Like, what are you not doing right?
Yeah.
You must not have believed. I stood there for 2.5 hours declaring God's goodness. I don't know. Like, no, I got a story now that, man, I'm going to shout God's goodness, and I'm going to shout God's faithfulness, even in my but if not.
Yeah.
Because and I've said this, and I believe it, and if I could find a cool way to do it, I'd tattoo it on my freaking forehead. God's character does not change due to my circumstances.
Yeah.
My circumstances change because of how I view God's character. And I just, like, I'm living and clinging on to this moment that, you know what? Life sucks and bad things happen to good people. But there will be a day that I stand in front of the Creator. And when I stand in front of Him, even amidst all the hell that I went through, and the pain and the anger, the sadness, I want Him to look at me. I want Him to say, well done. Like, even in the hand you didn't want, you stood firm in who I was. That's what I live for. So yeah, it's going to be a little temporal pain here. I got 80 years maybe. I don't think I got 80. I think I've run too hard to see 80. But, I've got some years left, and however that is, that's but a vapor, man. Like, to eternity, nah, it's 80 years ain't nothing. We think it's everything here, man, but I'm just living to hear well done. And and then I get to run the streets of gold with my son again.
Amen. I think just like a last point to end on, like mentioning Logan, because I remember right before before I heard the news, I was here for his graduation party. It was that Friday, I believe. And I remember it was a week before his graduation party. We were at Pastor Ed's house helping him with like some lawn work, and Logan was there. So he's talking to me about when he took this missions trip to Haiti. And I've talked to a lot of kids about mission trips, and they'd be like, yeah, it was fun. Like, it was cool seeing a different culture. But like Logan's going into like detail. Like, I felt like I was there. He's like I had to eat this food. I know that didn't taste good, but like it was still cool seeing the excitement of all those kids, like when they're like able to present something to you. And he just kept going on and on. So we were talking about college, he's getting ready to graduate. He's like, I want to go into, ministry and all that stuff. And normally I would just think of that as a generic answer from a kid who is the son of a pastor. But man, there was something different about that kid. So when he said that, I was just like, oh my gosh, he's so serious. He's so serious. And then just seeing him like continue on with it at that moment, like as I got to know him more, I started paying attention to him more like around his youth students. But the way like he carried on with his peers in that moment just made so much sense. Because like this kid gets it. And that's just a testament to how God's worked in your lives, the parents that you guys are. And I'm just honored that you took the time to be on this podcast with me, to just where we can be honest about everything. But without a doubt, I can honestly say, like, I would say a part of this podcast was because of that kid. Like he didn't even get to live his life yet, of which we would hope. But yet just seeing like on Instagram the impact on what he had on everybody every day, it's just kind of like, man, that kid ran the race.
Yeah, man, that's truly honoring. And I think as parents, we can sit here and think about all the things we would have done different, and his sister sitting there right here with us and just clicking all the buttons, and we don't We don't take that lightly, and I'm glad you said what you said, and I hope that everyone understands the weight of that. He ran his race well. He didn't run it perfect. He ran it well. And I think, you doing things like this podcast, taking the time to be honest and vulnerable with who you are, your feelings, you're running it well, man. And I want to encourage you. It's honoring, way more honoring. Like, I didn't expect it to get like this, honestly. It's an honor to be here on the first one that you can see.
Yeah.
Like, it's an honor. I don't know if you want it. Got tears and like, bro, go back to just mics, you know what I mean? But like, it's an honor to be a part of that. And I want to commend you, man, that the transparency, I believe it really will speak truth into lives. And I just encourage you to keep running well. This is a big deal that I think many may not want to hear it, but all need to hear it. So thank you for allowing me, man. It means the world.
First. Oh man, first video podcast.
How do you end it, man? Like, this
Like,
is a big deal. How do you end this thing?
I don't even know where to look.
You like just wave like, okay.
Everybody, thank you so much for tuning into the Truth Doesn't Hurt. And just look at the camera, just my one prayer is I just hope that this encourages people. Not in a just be like, oh, I hope this makes you feel good, but like, I hope this encourages you to look at God a little bit different, look at yourself different, and not be afraid to have those tough conversations or tough questions. Because the moment you start to peel back those layers, like, you're really starting to see the fruit of which God is producing inside of each and every one of you, whether you believe that or not. But I serve a God that, from which I've seen, like, he's going to stand firm in who he is. And I just want to present that truth to everybody. So thank you, PK, once again. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I finally get to say this. Hi, Mom. But I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.